Have you ever felt a strange coldness creep into your bones, even in the embrace of a warm summer? Have you seen a shadow dart past the corner of your eye, only to find nothing there? What if I told you there's one night every few years, a night when the moon, a symbol of safety and serenity, transforms into a deep crimson orb, dripping with evil and opening doors to other realms? A night known as a blood eclipse. It's the night when tormented souls dance, demons crawl from their lurking places, and unimaginable rituals are performed. This isn't just a story, it's a warning of the dark power that awakens when the moon's light is extinguished. Are you ready to hear the truth? In the village of Black Raven, where ancient mud houses intertwined like desperate arms reaching for salvation, legends were told by the fire more often than true stories. Legends of strange creatures, of malevolent spirits, and of curses that could not be erased. But the most terrifying legend of all, the one that sent shivers down the deepest parts of souls, revolved around the night of the lunar eclipse. It was believed that on that night, when the moon turned the color of blood, the barriers between the world of the living and the world of the dead weakened. The air became heavy with whispers, shadows lengthened and moved on their own, and the gates of hell opened to release their hideous beings. Hamid was a young man who didn't believe in these superstitions. He saw them as mere old wives' tales, woven from fear to entertain children on cold nights. He worked in the village fields, toiling under the scorching sun, and had no time for daydreams and superstitions. Hamid, do not underestimate what you do not understand, his old grandmother always used to tell him, her bright eyes shining with a wise gaze that hid years of experience. Darkness exists, even if you don't see it with your eyes. But Hamid would smile sarcastically. The only darkness I see, Grandma, is the darkness of night, and the light of a lamp is enough to dispel it. The night of the eclipse approached. The atmosphere in the village began to change. People became quieter, their gazes holding a hidden anxiety. Women locked their doors before sunset and lit lamps in every corner. Hamid observed this transformation with amusement. What scares them? He would ask himself. It's just a shadow passing in front of the moon, a natural phenomenon, nothing more. On that night, the sky was frighteningly clear. The stars twinkled like watchful eyes, and the moon slowly began to change. Hamid felt an unusual coldness creeping into his body, even though he was inside his familiar home. He looked out the window. The moon had begun to turn red, the color of flowing blood. The sight was not as ordinary as he had imagined. There was something about this color, something that portended evil. He remembered his grandmother's words. Could she have been right? Was there more than met the eye? Suddenly, he heard faint knocking on the door. He thought it was just the wind, but the sound repeated, this time stronger and more insistent. "Who's there?" Hamid asked, his heart pounding. He wasn't expecting visitors on this particular night. There was no reply. But the sound repeated, this time accompanied by a faint creaking, as if something was trying to force the door open. Fear crept into his heart. He grabbed a wooden stick that was beside him and approached the door cautiously. "I won't open it!" Hamid shouted, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. Silence for a moment, then he heard a faint sound, like a whisper coming from behind the door, saying his name. Hamid. The voice was like the rustling of dry leaves or the hiss of snakes. Blood froze in his veins. It was not a human voice. He backed away, his gaze fixed on the door. He felt that something was watching him from outside, something waiting for his moment of weakness. He remembered the warnings of the villagers not to go out on the night of the eclipse. Was this the reason? He began to hear other sounds, mumbles, moans, faint laughs rising from everywhere outside his house. He looked out the window again. The scene had changed terrifyingly. Shadows were dancing in the street, long and distorted, moving as if they were living beings. The red moon cast its pale light on the village, transforming everything into a nightmare scene. Hamid was trapped in his house, fear consuming him. He began to realize that what he had considered superstitions were now a terrifying reality. He remembered an old story about black magic and dark arts practiced on the night of the eclipse. His grandmother used to talk about it in whispers, as if merely mentioning it would bring evil. She used to say that there were those who exploited this night to open portals between worlds, to summon evil entities, or to offer sacrifices to gain dark power. Could what was happening now be the result of one of these acts? He heard a scream coming from afar. A terrifying scream, which quickly faded as if something had swallowed it. He covered his ears with his hands, trying to block out the horrifying sounds that were creeping into his hearing. But it was no use. The sounds were too strong to be blocked. They penetrated his mind, planting terror within him. Hours passed very slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. Hamid sat in a corner of the room, trembling with fear. The knocking on the door stopped, but the other sounds continued. Suddenly, the old wardrobe door opened slowly, emitting a terrifying creak. There was no one else in the room but him. The air was still and heavy. He saw a shadow moving inside the wardrobe, a shadow with no clear shape, but it was there. The shadow slowly began to emerge from the wardrobe, stretching and distorting as if taking a human form, but this form was not human at all. It was terrifyingly thin, its arms unnaturally long, and its eyes glowed a deep crimson, like the moon outside. Hamid couldn't scream. Fear had paralyzed his tongue. The entity approached him slowly, step by step, and each step seemed to echo in the silence of the room. Its face was distorted, its features indistinct, as if it was melting into the darkness. The entity extended its thin hand towards Hamid. Its hand was cold as ice, and its fingers were long like claws. In that moment, Hamid gathered all his strength. He pushed the entity violently and rushed towards the back door. He opened it with difficulty and dashed out of the house, ignoring the darkness that surrounded him. He ran down the street, the red moon lighting his way with its malevolent glow. The village had turned into a nightmare. Shadows danced, and horrifying sounds filled the air. He ran past his neighbor's house and heard screams from inside. He didn't stop. Fear propelled him, making him run as if his life depended on every step. But something was chasing him. He felt it behind him, its cold breath hitting the back of his neck. He turned back for a moment. He saw the entity following him, running at the same astonishing speed, its red eyes glowing in the darkness. His feet ached, his lungs burned, but he didn't stop. Suddenly, he saw a faint light coming from his grandmother's house. She was the only one who might be awake on this night. He rushed towards her house with all his remaining strength. He pounded on the door violently. This time he didn't wait. His grandmother slowly opened the door, her face pale, her eyes holding a look that knew fear. "What happened, Hamid?" she asked with a terrifying calmness, as if she had expected his arrival. Hamid slipped inside, closing the door forcefully behind him. "There's something out there, Grandma. Something terrifying." His grandmother looked at the red moon from the window. "They have awakened." "Who are they?" Hamid asked, his voice trembling. "Those who serve the darkness. Those who exploit the night of the eclipse to carry out their evil deeds." His grandmother sat on her old chair and lit more lamps. "Listen, my son. I will tell you what I was afraid to tell you." His grandmother began to tell the story of Sheikh Fahd, a sorcerer who lived in the village decades ago. Fahd was an ambitious man, seeking absolute power, even if the price was his soul. He learned black magic, mastered the dark arts, and began to summon demonic entities. The night of the eclipse was his favorite night. On that night, he performed his most wicked and satanic rituals. He offered sacrifices, whispered ancient incantations, and opened portals between worlds. On one eclipse night, he tried to summon a very powerful entity, an entity he couldn't control. "What happened to him?" Hamid asked, fear renewing in his heart. "His soul was torn apart. He became a slave to the entity he summoned," his grandmother said in a hushed voice. "And the entity? Is it still here?" "Yes, it waits. It waits every eclipse night to unleash Fahd's distorted remains, to hunt the living and increase its power." The entity that had chased Hamid was the remains of Sheikh Fahd, the tormented soul transformed into a servant of darkness. "We must stop it," Hamid said. "How?" "I left something important in my house for it, an old book it used for its rituals. If it finds it, its power will increase." "You cannot go back there, my son," his grandmother said. "The danger is too great." But Hamid had made up his mind. I must stop this." His grandmother gave him a small amulet made of carved wood with ancient symbols on it. "Keep this. It might protect you." Hamid went out into the darkness again, and this time he was more prepared. Fear still gripped him, but the determination to stop the evil was stronger. He returned to his house cautiously. The doors were wide open, and the house was eerily dark and silent. He entered slowly, clutching the amulet in his hand. The entity was inside, searching for something. It was rummaging through shelves, throwing things on the floor. Hamid felt his heart pound violently. He had to be careful. He crept into the room where he slept, where he had hidden the book under a loose wooden plank. He reached the spot, extended his hand, but the book was not there. "Are you looking for this?" He heard the entity's voice behind him. He turned quickly. The entity stood before him, clutching the old book in its distorted hand. Its red eyes glowed with a malevolent triumph. "Now, the power will be mine," the entity whispered in a hoarse voice. The entity began to read incantations from the book, unintelligible words that caused the house to tremble. Hamid felt darkness surround him, choking him. In a moment of desperation, he remembered his grandmother's words about the amulet. He raised it towards the entity. Suddenly, a powerful light erupted from the amulet, a bright white light, striking the entity directly. The entity shrieked, a deafening scream, a scream of terror and pain, then began to fade, turning into ash. The night of the eclipse ended. The light of dawn began to seep into the sky, and the red moon disappeared, leaving behind a pale gray sky. Hamid survived, but he was never the same. He came to believe in darkness, and in the existence of evil forces beyond human comprehension. And he knew that there are nights that must be respected, nights when no one dares to tamper with the forces of darkness, especially the night of the lunar eclipse.